good morning to you. I hope your Sunday morning is off to a rousing start and that you're enjoying your day. And this is live from Music City, Nashville and Studio 6 Studios. I'm Michael Caldwell, and I'm hoping that you're going to spend some time with us this morning and enjoy what God's trying to tell us in our message today. And what we're going to be looking at today is treasure. Treasures all over us, isn't it? Yes, matey, we're going to be going down this long road of trying to be a treasure seeker and trying to see exactly what God's going to be telling us. Well, it's not a very good pirate, is it? But did you know that if you just Google treasure, you're going to find 616 million results on Google? 616 million results. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And you'll find that when we're looking at, today we're talking about how much is treasure? What does treasure really look like? And of course, with all of the issues that we're experiencing right now globally with the pandemic of COVID-19, everyone's worrying about their treasure. What's my treasure going to look like? And I thought it would be interesting. Let's take a look back and see exactly what did treasure look like 100 years ago. And did you realize that in 1920, according to the Internal Revenue Service, the annual American income was $3,269.40. $3,269.40. Now, that sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it, considering that the stimulus package that just came out for most Americans that the government gave everyone, if you met a certain threshold for earning, was $1,200 per adult individual, $2,400 for a family, and then $500 for each dependent. Did you realize that in 2020, just 100 scant years forward, that you just received the annual income for an American in 1920? Treasure. Wow, it's a fleeting thing, isn't it? It's ever changing. And, that's one of the things I want us to look at today, and we need to ask ourselves this question: how much is enough? Can you imagine you're living back in 1920 and someone were to come up and say, well, the government's going to give you your entire annual income for the year, and what's it going to cost you? Nothing. You would have thought that you had won the lottery. And yet today we have people saying that that's just not enough. How much is enough? And we're going to look at that today from a different perspective. And Jesus has a very surprising answer. How much wealth, how much treasure is enough? Where do you find your treasure? What does it look like? We're going to explore that this morning. But before we get into that, let's transition a little bit into our moment of prayer. And we do have some things we need to pray for. Number one, my grandson had an accident yesterday, and Oscar broke his wrist, and he was playing with a new water slide that they had, and unfortunately he had one of those freak accidents and he broke his arm. And I'm so sorry for him, and I'm hoping that he's going to have a quick recovery. But at the same time, I know there's so many others of you out there that are struggling with things as well. Maybe it's still just the pressure of, what's happening in our world? What's it looking like? What are we doing in terms of our jobs, our careers? Are we going to ever get back to anything that looks like normal? Well, as we're contemplating that question, I do want to wish out a happy birthday to Reese. Her normal is a happy birthday on a pandemic-related landscape. But Reese, happy birthday to you, and we hope that you and John are enjoying wherever you might be and you're sequestering. But whatever your need might be this morning, whether it's something material, whether it's just a job, or whether it's stress, or maybe it's just even, you're not sure about your relationship with Jesus Christ. Maybe you need to be more confident in what we're going to be talking about today. If you have a need, you can see on the screen, text PRAY to 623-623. There will be someone at Brentwood Baptist that will be there ready to pray with you or to respond to you. All you have to do is just, in your smartphone or other device, just text PRAY to 623-623, and someone will be more than happy to pray with you for whatever need you might have. And I want you to know that that continues also in our family as well. We pray for all of you on a daily basis, and we pray that this will be over soon so that we can all gather back together. And I think we're getting closer. I don't know how much longer we'll even have to do these type of broadcasts or podcasts. But until then, we'll continue with that. But I'm looking forward to the day when we can all see each other in person again. And part of that, we have been so blessed as well that we've had one of my good friends out in California, Steve Amerson, that has given us some amazing musical options for us each week. You don't have to listen to just me for about 20 or 25 minutes. Steve brings us some levity to that and blesses us in song. And Steve's once again out there in California, and if everything goes well and if I can make sure that I can do this correctly, Steve's going to bring us a live song again this morning. And I want you just to sit back and listen to the words. I think it's very appropriate. Steve, take it away.
Nobody really wants to fight. Nobody really wants to go to war. If everyone wants to make things right, then what are we always fighting for? Does nobody want to see it? Does nobody understand that the power to heal is right here in our hands? We can be kind, we can take care of each other, we can remember that deep down inside we all need the same things. And maybe we'll find that when we are there for each other, that together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. Nobody really wants to fight. Nobody really wants to go to war. If everyone wants to make things right, then what are we always fighting for? Does nobody want to see it? Does nobody understand that the power to heal is right here in our hands? We can be kind, we can take care of each other, we can remember that deep down inside we all need the same things. And maybe we'll find that when we are there for each other, that together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. And it's not enough to talk about it, not enough to sing a song. We must walk the walk about it, you and I, do or die. We've got to try and get along. We can be kind, we can take care of each other, we can remember that deep down inside we all need the same things. And maybe we'll find that when we are there for each other, that together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. And maybe we'll find true peace of mind if we always remember we can be kind.
And once again, thank you, Steve, for blessing us with the song this morning. Thank you for getting up on an early Sunday morning in California and blessing us with We Can Be Kind. And if you'd like to purchase that song or something else from Steve, you can go to steveamerson.com and you can find all of the ordering options there. Any of the Christian music that you love to hear, or if you want to hear some Broadway musicals, or if you want to hear some Disney tunes or whatever, Steve does a lot of work for a lot of people. Tremendous talent, wonderful person, great Christian friend. Steve, thank you again for being with us this morning and blessing us with song. And what we're going to be looking at today as we get into our lesson, into our study, is we're going to be still coming off the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is talking to all of his disciples, and he's trying to give them a blueprint for Christian living. Now, this is really important for us to kind of stay focused on what we're looking at in terms of what Jesus is saying, because this was not necessarily meant for all of the multitudes, even though they were there. They were at the foot of the mountain as they were listening to Jesus speak directly to his disciples and trying to tell them about what was to come, what a Christian looked like. And people were there listening, but it's really important that you spend time understanding that this message, what Jesus is saying from the Beatitudes all the way up to today, this was for people that were already invested. They already were on the team. They were on Team Jesus. And Jesus was telling them what a life with him would look like and what you should be trying to model. He was giving us all the different attitudes, all the different characteristics that a Christian would actually look like. And we're continuing that today as we get into the 6th chapter in verses 19 through 22 and all the way up through 24. We're talking about what is your treasure. Now, we all love treasure, right? You know, we all want to know what in the world is in store for us financially. We like to think about, oh my goodness, you know, am I going to have enough money to retire? Am I going to have enough money to do the things that I want to do? Am I going to have fun in my life? And what Jesus is going to talk to us about real quickly here in verse 19, he's telling his disciples now, really stay with me on this, that this is to the disciples, not to the unbeliever, but to the disciples. He says, do not, disciples, people that are with me, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. He's saying, don't do this. But now in the very next verse, he tells us what we should do. In verse 20, he says, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Thieves break in and steal. There's some interesting parallels there, isn't it? You know, Jesus tells us what we shouldn't do, then tells us what we should do. It's like our own mom and dad when we were in our own household, but in our Heavenly Father, how much more should we listen to him? And Jesus uses these 3 examples of how things can be destroyed: moth, rust, thieves. But I want us to think about earthly treasure and how that sometimes, and Jesus, once again, now he's not saying it's anything wrong to pursue any of these things. He's just saying, where are you investing? What is the most important thing to you? Now, I can tell you from experience when I was growing up, I wanted to get that new car. Oh, don't you remember the new car smell? And you would go into the dealership and you would smell it and you would think, oh, I've just got to have that. So I'm going to store up or I'm going to save until I can actually get that. And you would be so happy the day that you purchased it and you're driving it along and you're having a wonderful time, and then somebody hits your door and they ding it. Now that new treasure is damaged. So I'm going to have to either get it repaired or else I'm going to have to save up and I'm going to do the whole process again. And we do, don't we? Do you still have the very first car that you ever had? Probably not. Maybe some of you do, but most of us, we still keep looking for that next big, great car. For me, it was a red Corvette. Wanted it my whole life, couldn't afford it as a kid growing up. As an adult, said I have to have it. I did get it until it just killed my back and realized that I didn't need that thing. What about a new job? Wow, if I had this job, that's the one that's going to give me the treasure I want. Or the new house. How many treasures, or the new dress, or the new shoes, or whatever we collect, whatever our passion is, we need it, we want it, and we store and we save and we try to make all of these things come together, only to find out after we've had it for a while, it just doesn't satisfy. It just doesn't satisfy, because what Jesus tells them, for where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. I want to give you a quick story here, and it's on someone that you may already be familiar with, but it's a gentleman named Jim Elliot. And Jim traveled to Ecuador with Pete Fleming, and you can see Jim is on the far right, and Pete Fleming is in the middle. And they were missionaries, and Jim's lifelong friend, Elizabeth Howard, also moved with him, and they went to an area or a village in Ecuador, Quito, and they were trying to actually witness. They wanted to go down and they wanted to take the word of Jesus Christ to the Waodani tribe that lived deep in the jungles of Ecuador. It was a violent and very murderous tribe that never had any real contact with the outside world. And Jim's passion, Jim's investment, his treasure was that he wanted to send this himself, basically, inject himself into the equation, what he called Operation Aka, and he wanted to take the word of Christ to these people. He invested everything. That was his treasure. And when they went there, of course, obviously none of them even knew the language. The Waodani women and the tribe, they all wanted to know more about what these people were saying. And so Jim and his other companions, they actually went down there and they actually tried to teach and preach them. Now, they had really searched out all the different areas, and they wanted to go deeper and deeper into the jungles until finally they were able to manage or to arrange a meeting. But they didn't send the ladies with them, just the guys. And so they said, we're going to go in and we're going to begin Operation Aka. And from their makeshift base on their sandbar, the men radioed their wives telling them, or they phoned them and told them that they would be in the village and that they would contact them again later because the process was underway. And after a few moments, the ladies back at base camp, they heard the gentleman saying, guys, the Akas are coming. And the last radio contact that Jim made to Elizabeth, who he had married while they were actually still at the camp, said, we'll call you back in about 3 hours. And unfortunately, 3 hours passed, and they no longer were able to make that phone call because they had been killed. The very people that they had come to try to witness, to try to spread the word of Jesus Christ, had killed them. This was back in 1956. He was a 28-year-old when this actually happened. And before he had actually gone to Ecuador, he had been questioned by so many of his peers around him and kept asking, why are you doing this? You're giving up all of your financial wealth to go do this. And this is a quote from Jim Elliot. You probably have heard this before, but it's actually Jim Elliot. He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Where is your treasure? For Jim Elliot, it was in the cause of Jesus Christ. He understood that by sacrificing himself, he gained for himself a greater reward, a greater treasure, even though it cost him his earthly existence. I would believe that Jim was doing exactly what Jesus Christ, what God had called him to do, and he did it all the way to the end. He understood that his treasure was not based upon what was in this world. And I think sometimes, that's something that we all struggle with, isn't it? We all think that everything is going to last forever, and yet we realize that it just doesn't. It just doesn't. Jesus goes on to say, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, or in the King James it says evil, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? How great is that darkness? Jesus had given the disciples a blueprint for living. And we find out later in Matthew in the 19th chapter, verses 16 through 22, we now see how that came to life, how it came to being. There was a parable that Jesus shared with, and Matthew recants it for us. The parable of the young rich ruler. In this story, a young ruler came to ask Jesus a question. He asked, how could he have eternal life? Jesus told him that he needed to obey the commandments, and the young ruler asked him, which ones? And Jesus said, you shall not murder. He went through the whole list. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And feeling really good about himself, the young ruler said, hey, I've kept all of these things. What do I lack? And then Jesus dropped a bomb. He dropped the bomb on him. Go sell what you have and give to the poor and follow me. Go sell what you have, give to the poor, and follow me. Now, Jesus doesn't necessarily ask all of us to do that exact thing. But we do know that the young man's heart, he was right there with Jesus Christ. Right there with him. What would my response have been? I don't know. I would like to think it would have been different. But this was the response of the young man. He was wealthy. He had a lot going for him. And he just wasn't willing to let go of those things in order to follow Jesus. He was willing to love his neighbor and do the commands that pertain to his fellow man. But when it came down to just making the choice, was his treasure with God or was it with this world? He just couldn't let go. And this is an interesting point from, I don't know if you know Ray Stedman, but from his commentary, The Christian and His Possessions, he said, I picked up a hitchhiker years ago, and I attempted to witness to him. We were talking about wealth and various things, and he said, I wish I were like my uncle. He died a millionaire. And Ray Stedman asked him, he said, well, what? And the young man said, yes, he died a millionaire, thinking that would impress Ray. And Ray told him, he said, no, he didn't. And the other person, perplexed, said, well, what do you mean? And Ray told him, he said, well, who has the million now? And glimpsing just a small light, the young hitchhiker said, now I see what you mean. We brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. And that's the trouble with all earthly treasures. We perish, and without exception, you can't take them with you. And yet, that's what we spend most of our time being focused on, isn't it? The eye is a symbol of our mind. It's the way we look at things. The eye observes, and in our mind or brain or whatever, we perceive it. And so, they all work together. And when we look at things and we try to analyze it, we try to put it in its proper relationship, and sometimes our perspectives get slanted, doesn't it? And that's the power of rationalization. When Jesus said, if the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? That's really kind of the ability of our minds to justify our actions. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty good at explaining why my desires or a need for an extravagance seems so reasonable and logical. I've heard this said many times. It was on sale, and I saved $75. Of course, I didn't need it, but I saved money by buying it. Doesn't that sound like all of us? We saved so much money, even though we didn't really need it, but we wanted it. And we rationalized it so well until it finally got to that point that we actually acted on it. And that's where the problem becomes. Because not only when our eye sees something and it convinces our mind, eventually everything yields to our will. Everything yields to our will. We have choices, don't we? We have a lot of choices in life. We can decide what we're going to do. We can decide where we want to go. We can decide so many things. God gave us that freedom of choice. We don't have to choose anything we don't want to. But you know what? That bridge in our life, what you see on the screen now, that bridge between earth or this existence and heaven, Jesus is that bridge. And if you want to go from point A to point B, and B being in heaven, you better be able to cross the bridge. You better be able to trust the bridge. But that's so hard for so many people, especially unbelievers. Jesus was talking to his disciples, But there were many other people in the audience that this was new to them. This was something they weren't very sure about at all. They weren't even sure who Jesus was. They wanted him to be a Messiah that would rid them of the Roman influence. They wanted a king. And Jesus would be their king, but just not the same one they thought. The treasure was different. But the bridge, Jesus, is still the same. You know, I'm reminded about today in so many ways of, there's an Irish playwright and a poet, died at 46 years of age back at the turn of the 19th century. And I think this sums up not only his generation, but also possibly everyone today, maybe for the beginning of all time. He said this comment: "I can resist everything except temptation." I can resist everything except temptation. You know, that's really kind of the paradox, isn't it? The one thing that we say that we need to resist, we can't. Only through Jesus Christ are we able to make that distinguished difference. I want you to ask yourself some tough questions this morning. I've asked them of myself already in my preparation for this. You know, I want you to take a long, hard, and honest look at your life. Take a long, hard, honest look. Not what you are trying to convince yourself, but I want you to ask, how much do I really crave the riches of this world? Do I really want to be a millionaire? Is that the most important thing to me? Or do I want to make a difference with the people around me? Do I want to use my possessions? Do I want to use the many wonderful blessings that God's given me to help others, help my family? Or am I doing it to help myself? Another question, do I spend time convincing myself why I need all these material possessions? Do I rationalize my actions? And that really spoke to me. Yes, I do number 2 all the time. I'll admit it. You know, I'm trying to come up with ways of why I need that new set of golf clubs. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but do I rationalize my actions based upon what I'm trying to do for God or what I'm just trying to do for myself? And then the final part that I want you to look at is this. When I have opportunities that are spiritual, do I embrace them? Do I seek them out with the same energy, the same fervor that I do when I see an opportunity for a financial gain? Oh, that hurts, doesn't it? When you see a neighbor or you see a friend that's either hurting or struggling, do you reach out and you say, that's an opportunity for me to help? Do you see it that way? Now, if you saw an opportunity to maybe make $1,000 on an investment, you would probably not miss any opportunity to try to do it. Do we see the same opportunities as spiritual needs for others? Well, you know, that to me was one of the things that really made this study come together for me. I can resist everything except temptation, but I want to see what the transition, you know, once again, Jesus told us things we shouldn't do, and then he told us what we should do. Later on, we find that the Apostle Paul sums this up so beautifully when we look at the 4th chapter of Philippians, verses 11 through 13, and I'm reading from the New International Version, or the NIV. Paul said that, you know, once again, he was the writer of most all of the New Testament, over half of it. And he was a Pharisee. I mean, he had been everything you needed to be successful. He had money, he had power, he had prestige. He had all of these things, and yet he gave it all up. His treasure was following Jesus Christ. His road to Damascus experience changed him forever. And it allowed him, even in the face of persecution, what we're going to find 11 through 13, when he says, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And now we get to this verse in 13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Paul got it. You know, you would love to think that that throng, that massive gathering at the Sermon on the Mount, that all of those people went away inspired to seek a treasure that was far greater than just what the material would offer. They were looking at the greatest treasure of all in a relationship with Jesus Christ. You know, and that's one of the things I want you to look at today. As you're looking and trying to determine, where are you going to find your life tomorrow? What's going to happen post COVID-19? What's our world going to look like? I hope it's different. I hope it's different for me. I hope that I look at it a little bit differently, that every day I look at opportunities that maybe I can be the Christian that Jesus Christ called me to be. And if you would like to know more about how to be a follower of Jesus Christ, we would love to help you. On the screen right now, you'll see text pray to 623-623. If you need to know how to follow Jesus Christ, or if you want to know how to be saved, there are people right there, and we'll be glad to reach out to you. We'll be glad to work with you and to answer some of those questions as you begin your walk with Jesus Christ. And if you're already still on your walk with Jesus Christ, if you're still here, and I am too, then there's something that he wants us to do. There's someone that we need to make a difference for. There's something in this world that is waiting for only what we can do. And when we look for that treasure, I pray that the treasure that we seek is not what we can just put our hands on today, but what will be there for us in the future with Jesus Christ in heaven one day. Until we meet again, I ask you to stay safe, stay blessed, and I really want you to enjoy this wonderful day that God has given us. I hope that you will love someone, that you will hug someone, that you will tell them how much they are loved by God and how much they're loved by you. And until we see you again, this is LifeWorks, and you stay blessed.